Version 1. The Galactic Concord hung in the silent dark like a jewel of light and order. It was a massive space station built by many species, circling a quiet star far from Earth. Inside its polished halls, diplomats from 12 different civilizations met to keep peace across the stars. Humans had only been allowed to join 5 years earlier, after proving they could travel faster than light and keep their colonies from fighting each other. They were the youngest members, often ignored, sometimes mocked, but always trying to be heard. Daniel Brooks stood alone in the grand chamber. He was tall, with tired eyes and a calm voice that had carried him through years of tough talks on Mars, Europa, and now here, among aliens who barely saw him as equal. He wore a simple gray suit, no armor, no weapons, just the symbol of Earth stitched over his heart. Around him, towering figures watched from raised seats. The Velnari, cold-blooded and sharp-eyed, sat in the center. Their scales shimmered under the soft lights, and their long fingers tapped impatiently on stone armrests. To their left, the gelatinous blores pulsed slowly in transparent tanks. On the right, the insect-like miracle clicked their mandibles in low conversation. Brooks had come to speak about mining rights in the Helios. Belt human colonies there were, running low on rare metals needed for ship engines and medical tech. The Council had promised fair access, but for months, Velnari patrols had blocked human freighters, claiming security concerns. Brooks had evidence, recordings, logs, even a signed agreement from a Velnari trade minister. He held the data chip in his hand, ready to present it. But before he could begin, the High Arbiter of the Velnari, Krell Voss, rose. His voice hissed through the chamber like steam from a broken pipe. "Daniel Brooks of Earth," he said, "you stand accused of stealing classified defense schematics from the Velnari High Fleet. You used your position to infiltrate secure channels during last cycle's summit." Brooks blinked. "That's not true," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I've never accessed your military networks. I don't even have the clearance." Krell Voss did not look at him. Instead, he turned to the other council members. "We have proof. A data trail leads directly to your personal comms unit. You betrayed the trust of this body." Brooks felt his stomach drop. He knew this was a setup. The Velnari had never liked humans gaining influence. They saw Earth's fast-growing colonies as a threat, but he also knew the rules of the conquered. Every species had the right to defend themselves, to see the evidence, to call witnesses. "I request a formal hearing," Brooks said clearly. "Under Conquered Charter Article 7, I am entitled to review the so-called proof and present my own." A murmur rose among the blores. One of the Mirkal tilted its head as if curious. Krell Voss remained still. Then, without warning, he raised his hand. "Article 7 is suspended," he declared. "This act is not a dispute, it is treason during a time of rising tension. The penalty is immediate purification." Before anyone could react, before Brooks could even take a breath, a beam of white-hot plasma shot down from the ceiling. It struck him square in the chest. There was no explosion, no sound, just a flash so bright it burned shadows into the walls. In less than a second, Daniel Brooks was gone. Only a scorched circle on the floor remained, and the faint smell of ozone. Back on Earth, the moment was captured by Brooks's diplomatic feed. The signal, encrypted but not blocked, streamed live to every major news network, every government terminal, every public screen in the Sol system. People stopped in the streets. Workers froze on assembly lines. Children watched in schools as the image of their envoy turned to ash. In Geneva, President Lena Grant was in a strategy meeting when the alert came through. She saw the footage once, then again, her face pale but set like stone. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply stood, walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Then she turned and said, "Call the Joint Defense Council. Full alert. Code black." Within the hour, every human warship from Luna to the edge of the Kuiper Belt powered up their engines. Factories that once built passenger liners began welding armor plates onto hulls. On Mars, the Red Shield Battalion loaded into dropships. In the asteroid colonies, miners handed over their drills and picked up rifles. The United Nations Stellar Assembly, usually slow and full of debate, passed a single resolution in under 10 minutes. In response to the unlawful execution of Ambassador Daniel Brooks, humanity declares a state of total defense. All non-essential diplomacy is suspended. Military command is unified under the Terran Defense Coalition. Admiral Kyle Dawson, retired but recalled within minutes of the broadcast, stood on the bridge of the newly recommissioned battleship Odyssey. He watched the replay of Brooks's death one last time, then deleted the file. "We don't fight for revenge," he told his crew, his voice rough but calm. "We fight so no human ever gets silenced like that again." Meanwhile, in a hidden lab on Titan, scientist Maya Ruiz stared at the same footage on a small screen. Her hands shook, but her mind raced. She had spent years designing defensive systems that could protect ships without firing a shot. Now she realized defense wasn't enough. Humanity needed to be unpredictable, fast, and smart. She opened a new project folder and typed 2 words: Aegis Protocol. On the streets of New Chicago, a teenager named Eli taped a photo of Brooks to his bedroom wall. His older sister had served on a medical frigate near the Concord. She'd written him just last week saying things were getting tense. Now he knew why. He signed up for the Youth Engineering Corps the next morning. The galaxy had expected humans to protest, to beg for justice, maybe even to back down. What they got instead was silence, then movement. Ships moved. Factories hummed. Minds sharpened. The message was clear, even if no one said it out loud. You burned our voice, but you woke up our fists. And out in the black, far from Earth, the first human scout ship changed course. It wasn't heading home. It was heading toward the Keswick Relay, a key communications hub controlled by the Xanthari, one of the Council's strongest allies. No orders had been given yet, but the captain knew what was coming. He checked his weapon status, set his course, and whispered, "For Brooks." The stars watched, cold and distant, as humanity took its first real step into war, not as a scattered group of colonies, but as one people, united by fire and fury. The age of begging was over. The age of answering had begun. Part 2. In the weeks after Daniel Brooks turned to ash, Earth did not weep for long. Grief hardened into purpose. Cities that once buzzed with commerce now echoed with the clang of steel and the hum of fusion reactors running at full power. The Terran Defense Coalition, once just a name on old military charts, became real. Its flag, a silver fist gripping a star, flew over every shipyard, every command center. Every school turned into a training camp. Admiral Kyle Dawson stood on the observation deck of Lunar Command, watching shuttles dart between orbital docks like angry bees. His face was lined with old scars and new worries, but his eyes were sharp. He had spent 30 years keeping peace between human factions. Now he had to unite them against something far bigger. He didn't like war, but he liked injustice less. And what the Council did wasn't just unjust, it was a message. They thought humans were weak. Dawson intended to prove them wrong. Orders flew from his desk like sparks from a forge. Civilian freighters were stripped of cargo holds and fitted with missile racks. Mining drones were reprogrammed to swarm enemy sensors. Even old tourist cruisers near Jupiter were retrofitted with shield emitters and given new names like Vigil and Reckoning. No ship was too small. No idea was too strange. If it could fight, it would. At the same time, Senator Paul Green traveled from colony to colony, not in a luxury shuttle, but in a battered transport with peeling paint. He spoke in town squares and factory break rooms and underground bunkers on icy moons. He didn't talk about glory or conquest. He talked about dignity. "They didn't just kill Brooks," he'd say, voice low but firm. "They told us we don't belong at the table. Well, we're not asking for a seat anymore. We're building our own table, and it's made of steel." People listened. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Retired engineers came back to design better targeting systems. Farmers on Ganymede offered their harvest to feed the fleet. Even children collected scrap metal and handed it over with notes that read, "For the ships." But the real change came from Titan, where Maya Ruiz worked in a lab buried under 10 meters of ice. She hadn't slept in days. Her hands moved fast over holographic screens, lines of code scrolling like falling rain. She wasn't building bombs. She was building silence. The Aegis Protocol was her answer to the galaxy's arrogance. It used thousands of tiny drones, no bigger than a hand, that could mimic asteroid debris or cosmic dust. Each carried a micropulse emitter that could blind enemy scanners for seconds. Alone, they were useless. Together, they could hide an entire fleet. She tested it on a mock Velnari cruiser in simulation. The drones swarmed like fireflies, shifting position every millisecond. The cruiser's sensors saw nothing but empty space, until human missiles tore through its hull from point-blank range. Ruiz smiled for the first time in weeks.
"They think they see everything," she muttered.
Let's show them how blind they really are. Back on Earth, President Lena Grant signed the final order. Total war status was now active. That meant every human system, every citizen, every resource was part of the effort. No more half measures. No more waiting for permission. If the Council wanted a war, they would get one, but not the kind they expected. Humanity didn't have the biggest ships. They didn't have ancient weapons or galaxy-spanning empires. What they had was something older, something fiercer, the will to protect their own. When a Velnari patrol ship drifted too close to the Neptune border, it didn't find a lone scout. It found 6 corvettes waiting in the shadow of a gas giant, engines cold, weapons hot. The patrol vanished without sending a distress call. The message was sent. We are not prey. Dawson reviewed the after-action report with quiet pride. No human lives lost. Enemy ship destroyed. Perfect ambush. He knew the Council would call it cowardly. Good. Let them underestimate them again. Meanwhile, on the colony world of Eos Prime, a young pilot named Jake Morrow sat in his fighter's cockpit running diagnostics. His father had been a diplomat too, killed in a mysterious accident near Velnari space years ago. Jake never believed it was an accident. Now he finally understood why. He tapped his console and whispered, "This one's for you, Dad." Training intensified. Pilots flew drills in asteroid fields, learning to navigate blind. Marines practiced boarding actions in zero gravity, using magnetic boots and sonic cutters. Engineers built decoy signals that mimicked the energy signature of capital ships. Nothing was wasted. Everything had a purpose, even art changed. Songs once about love and stars now spoke of courage and sacrifice. Murals appeared on space station walls showing Brooks not as a victim, but as a torchbearer. His face, calm and resolute, stared out from every corner of human space, a silent reminder of why they fought. The Council, watching from their gleaming towers, saw only chaos. They thought humans would crumble under pressure, that their emotions would make them reckless. They didn't understand that human emotion wasn't weakness, it was fuel. Grief became resolve. Fear became focus. Anger became action. Ruiz finally activated the first Aegis swarm. Thousands of drones launched from hidden bays on the Odyssey, spreading into the void like seeds on the wind. They would drift for weeks invisible, waiting. When the time came, they would turn darkness into a weapon. Dawson gave the order to move the fleet toward the Keswick relay. It was a bold move, almost suicidal. But boldness was all they had. "We don't need to win every battle," he told his captains over secure comms. "We just need to make them doubt their own eyes." As the ships jumped to warp, lights dimmed across human colonies. Not from fear, but from focus. Factories ran quieter now, conserving power for the front. Families gathered not to mourn, but to plan. How to grow more food, how to recycle more metal, how to send more support. In a small apartment on Luna, a girl named Mia taped a drawing to her window. It showed a human ship flying past a burning Velnari cruiser, with Brooks' face in the stars above. She didn't know if her drawing would matter, but she hoped someone somewhere would see it and remember. The galaxy thought humanity was loud, messy, and temporary. They were about to learn that messy could be clever. Loud could be terrifying. And temporary? No. Humans had crawled out of caves, survived ice ages, crossed oceans, and walked on the moon. They weren't going anywhere. Out in the black, the first human strike force dropped out of warp near the Keswick relay. Engines stayed off. Comms stayed silent. Only the Aegis drones moved, swirling like ghosts around the massive station. The Xanthari guards saw nothing. They never saw it coming. And so, with quiet precision and cold fury, humanity began to answer, not with words, not with pleas, but with action, swift, smart, and unstoppable. The war had truly begun. Part 3. The Keswick relay hung in space like a silver spiderweb, spinning signals across 3 star systems. It was neutral ground, or so the galaxy believed. Controlled by the Xanthari, a species of tall, four-armed beings with skin like polished obsidian, it carried messages for traders, diplomats, and even enemy fleets during wartime. No one had ever attacked it. Until now, human ships arrived not with fanfare but with silence. 6 corvettes and 2 stealth frigates drifted out of warp far beyond sensor range. Their engines were cold, their hulls dark. Around them, Maya Ruiz's Aegis drones swirled like dust in a breeze. bending light and scattering radar pulses. To the Xanthari, the sector looked empty. Inside the lead frigate, Captain Jake Morrow checked his targeting display. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded. This was it, the first real strike. Not a skirmish, not a warning. A declaration. He gave a single nod. Deploy mines! From hidden bays, gravitic mines launched on silent thrusters. They latched onto asteroids near the relay, invisible, waiting. Then the human ships pulled back, vanishing into the clutter of the asteroid belt. They didn't fire a shot. They didn't need to. 2 hours later, a Xanthari patrol cruiser arrived, responding to a fake distress call sent from a hacked civilian freighter. As it slowed near the relay to investigate, the mines activated. Gravity fields twisted space itself, crushing the cruiser's engines and snapping its spine like dry wood. Before the Xanthari could react, human dreadnoughts dropped out of warp behind them. Missiles streaked through the void. Railguns fired slugs faster than sound. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The Xanthari lost 3 capital ships, the relay's main hub, and over 2,000 lives. Humanity lost 2 frigates caught in the crossfire and 312 souls. Good people, brave people. But they proved something far more valuable. They could win. News of the attack spread faster than light. The council was stunned. They had expected human rage, yes, but rage was messy, loud, easy to crush. This was different. This was cold, precise, smart. The Velnari High Command scrambled to understand how humans bypassed their sensors. The blurs pulsed in alarm. Even the Miracle grew quiet, their clicking uncertain. Back on Earth, there were no celebrations, no parades. Admiral Kyle Dawson stood in his war room, staring at the casualty list. He marked each name with a black pen. Then he turned to his staff. We hit them where it hurts, he said. Now we make sure they never recover. Human tactics shifted. No more large fleets charging headfirst. Instead, small strike groups hit supply lines, jammed comms, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. On the icy moon of Varel 7, human Marines disabled a Velnari fuel depot using nothing but thermal charges and stolen uniforms. In the Helios belt, mining drones reprogrammed by engineers on Ceres lured enemy scouts into asteroid traps. The Council tried to respond. Velnari warships swept through human borders, glassing empty colonies as warnings. But the colonies weren't empty. They were bait. Hidden turrets and drone nests waited in the ruins. Every attack cost the Council more than it gained. Senator Paul Green used the victories to rally more support. He stood on a platform built from salvaged ship plating and spoke to millions. They thought we'd break, he said. But every time they strike, we learn. Every time they burn, we rebuild stronger. His words weren't fancy, but they were true. And truth spread fast. Maya Ruiz worked day and night. Her Aegis protocol evolved. Now the drones could mimic enemy signals, sending false fleet positions to confuse patrols. She even developed a new weapon, pulse lances that overloaded alien shield harmonics. Tested on a captured Xanthari fighter, the shields flickered and died in under 3 seconds. They rely on old tech, she told Dawson over comms. We're writing new rules. Meanwhile, cracks began to show in the Council itself. The Miracle, long treated as second-class members, grew restless. Their leaders whispered that the Velnari had brought this war on themselves by executing Brooks without proof. Some Miracle scouts even avoided engaging human ships, turning away at the last moment. On a remote listening post near the Orion Spur, a human signals officer named Lena Torres picked up a strange transmission. It wasn't encrypted like enemy comms. It was a simple data burst repeating the same coordinates. She ran it through decryption, nothing. But when she played the audio layer, she heard faint clicks. Miracle language. It was a map. A patrol route. A gift. She sent it up the chain. Within hours, Admiral Dawson had a plan. A human ambush waited along that route. When the Velnari fleet arrived, expecting routine patrol, they found a storm of missiles and railgun fire. Again, humans struck fast and disappeared. Again, the Council bled. But war has a cost. On the colony of New Carthage, a Velnari retaliation strike hit hard. Orbital defenses were overwhelmed. The city burned. Families ran through streets filled with smoke and falling debris. Among them was a young medic named Eli, the same boy who had taped Brooks's photo to his wall months before. He dragged 3 children to a bunker before the sky turned red. He didn't cry. He just clenched his jaw and kept moving. Back on Earth, President Lena Grant visited the families of the fallen. She didn't give speeches. She sat with them, held their hands, listened. Then she returned to her office and signed new orders: expand ship production, accelerate drone deployment, and open talks with neutral systems. "We fight smart," she told her advisors, "but we also build bridges where we can." The galaxy watched, uneasy. Humans were no longer the loud newcomers begging for a seat. They were ghosts in the dark, striking without warning, vanishing without trace. Their ships were smaller, but their minds were sharper. Their losses hurt, but they never stopped. In a hidden hangar on Mars, engineers welded the final plates onto a new class of destroyer: faster, stealthier, deadlier. They named it the Brooks class. The first ship would launch in a week. Out near the Keswick ruins, Jake Morrow guided his fighter through debris. He found a piece of Zinthari hull scorched but intact. He brought it back, not as a trophy, but as proof. Proof that humans could stand tall. Proof that silence could be louder than screams. The Council had expected a storm of anger. Instead, they got a tide, slow, steady, and impossible to hold back. And as more neutral systems watched human precision and resilience, they began to wonder. Maybe the real power in the galaxy wasn't who had the oldest empire, but who refused to kneel. War was no longer just about revenge. It was about respect, and humanity would earn it one silent strike at a time. Part 4, the war had changed. It was no longer just human against the Council. It was becoming something deeper, something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. The Council's unity, once thought unbreakable, began to crack like old glass under pressure. And the force behind that pressure was not just human weapons, but human will. On the frozen moon of Varel 9, snow fell in slow motion under a pale red sun. Hidden in an ice cave, a group of human Marines waited. Their mission was not to destroy, but to rescue. Intelligence from the strange Mirkal signal had led them here. A Mirkal dissident leader, one who had spoken against the Velnari's harsh rule, was being held in a Velnari prison camp. His name was Crix. He had tried to call for a fair trial for Daniel Brooks before the execution. For that, he was branded a traitor. Captain Jake Morrow led the team. They moved in darkness, using thermal cloaks and silent boots. The camp was small but guarded by drones and 2 Velnari sentries. The Marines took them out with stun darts, no noise, no alarm. Inside the main cell they found Crix, weak but alert. His many eyes blinked in surprise when he saw humans. "You came for me?" He clicked in broken English. "We came because you stood up for what was right," Morrow said. They carried him out as the camp's backup systems powered on. Alarms blared too late. By the time Velnari ships arrived, the humans were gone, vanishing into the storm. Back aboard the Odyssey, Crix met Admiral Kyle Dawson. Through a translator, he spoke of the growing unrest among the Mirkal. Many believed the war was unjust. Many feared the Velnari were leading the Council to ruin. "We are not your enemy," Crix said. "We never were." Dawson listened. Then he made a choice. He offered the Mirkal safe passage, medical aid, and a seat at the planning table, if they would share what they knew. Crix agreed. Within days, more Mirkal defectors arrived, bringing data on Velnari fleet movements, shield frequencies, even secret weapon projects. The tide was turning, not by force alone, but by trust. On Earth, life continued, but not as before. Cities ran on rationed power. Children learned engineering alongside reading. Factories never slept, yet morale stayed high. People sang in the streets, not songs of sorrow, but of strength. A new anthem spread from Mars to Titan. "We are the fire." It spoke of Brooks, of the fallen, of the ships flying in the dark. It reminded everyone why they worked, why they gave, why they fought. Senator Paul Green traveled to the outer colonies not to give speeches, but to listen. In a dome on Europa, he sat with farmers growing algae under artificial suns. On a mining rig near Saturn, he shared a meal with welders who hadn't seen their families in months. He told their stories back on Earth, reminding the people that victory wasn't just won in space, it was built on the ground. One bolt, one crop, one hope at a time. Maya Ruiz's work reached a new level. With Mirkal data, she refined the pulse lances. Now they could pierce Velnari shields in under a second. She also developed a new AI system that predicted enemy movements by studying past battles. It wasn't perfect, but it gave human fleets a crucial edge. "They think in straight lines," she told her team. "We think in circles, in shadows, in silence." President Lena Grant used the growing momentum to reach out to neutral systems. those who had stayed out of the war. She sent envoys not with threats but with offers, trade deals, tech sharing, mutual defense pacts. Some refused, but others, seeing how humans fought with honor and intelligence, said yes. A small alliance began to form, not of conquest but of survival. The council tried to hold together. The Velnari demanded total loyalty. They punished any species that showed doubt. But fear only breeds more fear. The Blors, once silent supporters, began delaying supply shipments. The insectoid Zenthari questioned why they were dying for a war they never wanted. Whispers became arguments. Arguments became refusals. Admiral Dawson knew this was their chance. He planned a bold strike, not at a military target, but at the heart of Velnari pride. The Sunrender. It was a planet-cracker weapon, capable of shattering worlds. The Velnari had built it in secret, hoping to use it as a final threat. But human spies, aided by Mirkal informants, found its location. The mission would be dangerous, nearly impossible. But if they could stop the Sunrender, the war might end without Earth ever being touched. Back home, people prepared, not for invasion but for victory. Schools taught children how to rebuild after battles. Engineers designed new cities that could rise from rubble in weeks. Artists painted murals of human and Mirkal hands clasped in unity. The message was clear. This was not just about revenge. It was about building a future where no envoy could be burned for speaking the truth. Eli, the young medic from New Carthage, now trained as a field engineer. He helped design mobile hospitals that could deploy in minutes. He still carried the memory of the burning sky, but now it fueled his work, not his fear. In a quiet moment aboard the Odyssey, Maya Ruiz looked at a photo of Daniel Brooks. She had never met him, but she felt like she knew him. He had stood alone and paid the price. Now millions stood with him in spirit. "We won't let it be for nothing," she whispered. The fleet gathered near Proxima Centauri. Ships from Earth, Mars, the Belt, even a few Mirkal vessels painted with human markings. They checked weapons, ran drills, said quiet goodbyes over comms. No one knew if they would return. But all knew why they went. Admiral Dawson stood on the bridge watching the stars. He thought of Brooks, of the 3 and 12 lost at Keswick, of the children on Earth who still believed in peace. He took a deep breath and gave the order. "All ships, prepare for jump. Target Sunrender launch site." The engines hummed. The stars blurred. And humanity, once seen as chaotic and weak, moved as one. Calm, focused, and ready to face the end of the world if it meant saving it. Part 5. The Sunrender hung in orbit above a dead moon, a monstrous ring of black metal and humming reactors. It was not a ship. It was a weapon built to end worlds. The Velnari had spent decades designing it in secret, saving it for the day they needed to remind the galaxy who held true power. Now, with human fleets striking deeper and allies slipping away, the High Arbiter Krell Voss gave the final order: aim it at Earth. But the humans already knew. Thanks to Mirkal defectors and Maya Ruiz's listening drones, the launch codes, the trajectory, the activation sequence, all of it had been stolen before the Velnari even powered it up. Still, knowing was not enough. They had to stop it. Admiral Kyle Dawson led the fleet through the asteroid belt of Proxima Centauri, a jagged maze of rock and ice. His plan was simple but brutal: draw the Velnari escort fleet into a trap, then send a strike team to the Sunrender's core. 3 human carriers would act as bait. They would fire everything they had, make as much noise as possible, and die if they must. Their sacrifice would buy time. The battle began at dawn, or what passed for dawn in deep space. Plasma beams lit the void as Velnari cruisers opened fire. Human carriers returned fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked. Shields flared and died. One carrier, the Vigil, lost its engines early and spun out of control, but its guns kept firing until the hull cracked open. The second, the Reckoning, took a direct hit to its bridge but launched its last drone swarm before going dark. The third, the Odyssey, held strong, drawing the bulk of the enemy fire. Inside the Odyssey, Maya Ruiz worked furiously. She had boarded the ship not as a scientist but as a soldier. Her fingers flew across the console, slicing through Velnari firewalls with code written in the quiet hours before the jump. Beside her, Captain Jake Morrow watched the battle unfold on the main screen. "We're losing them," he said quietly. "We knew we might," Ruiz replied, not looking up. "But we only need 5 more minutes." On the bridge, Dawson gave the final order: "Launch the strike team. Godspeed." 6 drop pods shot from the Odyssey's belly, streaking toward the sun render like falling stars. Inside, Marines in reinforced armor held their breath. They knew most would not return. Their mission was not to destroy the weapon, that would take too long. Their mission was to plant a data spike deep in its core and let Ruiz do the rest. The pods hit the sun render's outer shell. Magnets locked. Hatches blew. The Marines poured out, fighting through automated turrets and Velnari guards. One by one they fell, but they pushed forward. Eli, the young medic-turned-engineer, carried the spike on his back. He reached the core chamber, bleeding from a shrapnel wound, and jammed the device into the main console. "Spike is in!" he gasped over comms. "Get out of there," Morrow shouted. "I'm not fast enough," Eli said. "Just do it." Ruiz didn't hesitate. She activated the spike. It didn't explode. It rewrote. In seconds, it flipped the sun render's targeting matrix, reversed its gravity pulse, and locked the firing sequence. The weapon, meant to crush Earth, now pointed at the Velnari flagship hovering nearby. Krell saw the change too late. Alarms screamed across his bridge. "Shut it down," he hissed. But the system was locked. Human code held it tight. The sun render fired. A beam of twisted gravity and plasma lanced out, not toward the stars, but straight into the Velnari command ship. The hull buckled. Reactors blew. The flagship vanished in a silent bloom of fire and metal. Krell died without a word. The remaining Velnari ships froze. Their leader was gone. Their ultimate weapon turned against them. Panic spread through their ranks. Some fled. Others powered down, surrendering in silence. The battle was over. Back on Earth, people watched the feed from the Odyssey. They saw the sun render fire. They saw the Velnari flagship disappear. They heard Ruiz's calm voice say, "Target neutralized." Then silence. Then cheers. Not loud, but deep, like a wave rising from the soul of a people who had carried too much pain for too long. The council collapsed within days. The Blors declared neutrality. The Zenthari withdrew their forces. The Mirkal formed their own council, inviting humans to join as equals. The war was not won by destroying every enemy, but by breaking the will of the few who thought they ruled the stars. Peace talks began not on the Galactic Concord, but aboard the battered Odyssey, now floating near Mars. President Lena Grant stood at the head of the table. Across from her sat the new Mirkal speaker, a few Zenthari delegates, and even a lone Velnari survivor. Humbled, silent, no longer arrogant. Grant made one demand: full recognition of humanity as a sovereign power, equal voice in all future decisions, and reparations not in credits but in truth. A public memorial for Daniel Brooks. A new charter that no envoy could be punished without trial. The council, what remained of it, agreed. On Earth, a new plaque was placed in Geneva beneath the old UN building. It bore Brooks's name and a single line: "They tried to silence us. They taught us how to roar." Life slowly returned to peace. Factories switched back to building homes, not hulls. Children played in parks without air raid drills. But things were not the same, and they never would be. Humanity had changed. They had faced the darkness and did not blink. They had lost much but gained something greater: respect. Admiral Dawson retired again, this time for good. He moved to a quiet cabin on the coast of Oregon, where he watched the real stars, not the ones on screens. Maya Ruiz stayed in science, but now she worked on healing. Clean water systems for war-torn colonies, energy grids for rebuilding cities. Jake Morrow became a flight instructor, teaching new pilots not just how to fight, but why to protect. And in schools across the system, children learned the story of Daniel Brooks not as a victim, but as the spark that lit a fire strong enough to warm a species through its darkest hour. The galaxy had thought humans were loud, messy, and temporary. Now they knew better. Humans were not just survivors. They were builders, fighters, dreamers who would not be erased. And in the quiet hum of starships flying peaceful routes, in the laughter of children under open skies, in the steady glow of new cities rising from ash, the answer to the Council's cruelty echoed across the stars, not with fury, but with life.